All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to our 4-H Food Revolution live series where we're doing some kitchen science experiments. Today's experiment is going to be writing secret messages with cranberry juice, which is a pretty interesting one. Very cool. Yesterday, in case you missed it, we did some baking soda and vinegar volcanoes and we made oobleck. And just in a little while, I will talk about what our experiments are for tomorrow to wrap up the week of kitchen science. So, without further ado, let's get into our cranberry secret messages experiment. So, the first thing you're going to need to do is gather all of your materials for this experiment. For the purpose of this demonstration, I've prepared a few things beforehand, but in total, this experiment probably would take only about 30 minutes. Really great fun in the kitchen. So, you will need a small pot and access to a stovetop. And again, you can see the table here as well as the mirror above me in case this isn't the best view. So you need a small pot. Whole cranberry juice. This is important. You want to make sure that it's not cranberry apple or cranberry grape or any of those other mixtures of cranberry juice you can get. You just want it to be plain cranberry juice. Another optional ingredient is jellied cranberry sauce. I did not use that today, but that's something that you can add in. You'll need a bowl for mixing, measuring utensils, baking soda, and warm water. And finally, you will need some white paper. The color is important, you do want it to be white, and a paintbrush. Alright, so once you've gathered all your materials, the first thing you're going to want to do is add 2 cups of cranberry juice to your small pot and bring it to a boil. So we'll use our measuring cups here. Measure out our cranberry juice. And again, for those of you who are leaders that may be watching, doing experiments like this in the kitchen that require units of measurement is a great way to have some creative learning going on for the youth, especially learning about math and things of that nature. If you have some measurements that need to be converted, or if you're doubling a recipe for whatever reason, that's a good way to incorporate some of the math part of STEM into the science that we're doing here. All right, so we've got our cranberry juice and our pot. We'll put this on the stove and bring it to a boil. Now, I mentioned before I prepared some things before starting because it takes a few minutes for cranberry juice to boil. So I already have that prepared. I'm just going to step out of frame for one moment and grab that. All right. So here we have our cranberry juice. This was brought to a boil. It takes about 5 minutes to start boiling, and then once it's boiling, you're going to want to leave it on medium to high heat and let it boil for about 5 minutes, and then turn the heat off, let it simmer down, and then let it cool for about 5 minutes. So this is already prepared, but if you're doing this with us at home, just keep that time frame in mind. I mentioned before this should take about 30 minutes, and the majority of it is from waiting for the cranberry juice to boil. If you choose to use jellied cranberry sauce as part of this experiment, you'll also want to add half of a can to the cranberry juice and boil it together, stirring it so that it doesn't get too chunky, and making sure to keep an eye on that so nothing gets burnt or overflows or anything like that. So, once you have your cranberry juice prepared, the next thing that you're going to want to do is make our invisible ink. So to do that, you're going to want to take your bowl, your baking soda, and your hot water, and get my tablespoon off my ring here. We need 4 tablespoons of baking soda and 1/3 cup of hot water. And I will say that this works much better if you are making sure to use hot water because it dissolves the baking soda better, and you'll see once we get to that point in this experiment that this is what we're going to be using as our paint and our ink on the paper. So if it's chunky and the baking soda isn't dissolved very well, it's not going to work as well. So you're going to want to make sure that you use hot water. There we go. And 4 tablespoons of baking soda. And then stir this up. It becomes sort of like a paste paint texture. Like I mentioned before, you're going to want it to be a smooth texture, not super super chunky. If you look up in the mirror, it might be a little bit hard to see, but this is pretty soupy. And this is one of those things that you can play around with. If you would prefer it to be more of a paint consistency, you can try it with less water. You can try it with more baking soda. Same thing with the cranberry juice. If you add it to your invisible ink, which we'll get to in a few minutes here, and you don't get the results that you were looking for, you can try using more or less cranberry sauce versus how much juice you have, how long you boil it for, how long you let it cool for. So that's one of the cool things about this experiment in particular. There's a lot of different ways that you can play around with it to see how the final product turns out. And I'll be honest, I don't know how the final product of this demonstration will turn out today, because I've done this once before and it turned out very differently than I was expecting. I'm doing things a little bit different this time, but that's the fun thing about science. You never quite know what you're gonna get. So we'll see what happens. So now I have my invisible ink and my cranberry juice that's all mixed up here. So once this is completed, you're gonna wanna get a piece of paper and a paintbrush and take some of your paint, and you can write a secret message, draw a picture, whatever you would like. So I'll draw a few little pictures here. Now I'm no artist, but I will do my best. Alright, got a little, I don't know if you guys can see in the mirror up there, but we got a little smiley face going here. Now, I mentioned before you're going to want to use real hot water so your baking soda dissolves. And I don't think that my water was hot enough, because there's some baking soda that has settled to the bottom here. So if you're trying this at home, like I said, make sure that you use real hot water. And if for some reason your baking soda does not dissolve, just make sure that you kind of scoop it up on the paintbrush, because I'll talk about it in a little more detail in just a minute here, but the baking soda is an important part of the reaction that makes this a cool experiment. So, all right, we got this all settled on our paper, so we're gonna let this dry for just a minute here. And while we're doing that, I will tell you guys a little bit about how this experiment works. So, cranberry juice, let me back up. Yesterday we did baking soda and vinegar volcanoes, and we talked about how that's an acid-base reaction. It produces gas. This is another example of an acid-base reaction. So our cranberry juice here is acidic, which means that it has a very low pH, and our paint here with the baking soda in it is a basic solution, which means that it has a very high pH. Those two things are opposite, and that happens many times in nature, but when you mix an acid and a base together, they react and you get some sort of extra product. So when we did the volcanoes yesterday, the product that we got was a gas, which is what caused the bubbles and the foaming and makes the volcano look interesting. Today what we're going to see is a color change instead of a gas. So there are a bunch of different ways that there are a bunch of different things you can use as an indicator that a reaction is taking place. And yesterday and today we've seen two examples of that. So today we'll see the color change, hopefully, if this goes according to plan. And yesterday we saw the production of a gas. So the reason that this works is because cranberries contain a pigment, has a real fancy name. It's called anthocyanin, which is a bluish kind of green purple pigment. It's contained in many plants. And when we add that from an acidic cranberry juice to a basic baking soda, you'll see them react and the color will change. So the goal of this experiment is eventually, when we paint the cranberry juice onto our secret message here, it will turn to like a greenish bluish color. And that just indicates that the acid-base reaction has taken place. So without further ado, I'm not sure if you can see in the mirror here, we have our message. Not very secret because the paper is wet and you can see very clearly what was written. But if you have more time when you're trying this on your own, you can certainly let the paper dry for longer. So I'm just gonna rinse my paintbrush off here and add some cranberry juice, and we'll see if we get a color change. And one of the variations of this that you can do is, instead of painting the cranberry juice over top of your baking soda invisible ink, you can get a spray bottle. You can add this to the spray bottle, hold your picture up and spray it on there too. I have not tried that method, but I'm sure that it would work out pretty interestingly. So this is a very small paintbrush, but I'm going to do my best to get enough cranberry juice on our message here and see what happens. I'm definitely going to have to bring this up closer to the camera for you guys to see. The color is changing, but I don't think you'll be able to see it in the mirror above my head. I might add that having a variety of paintbrush sizes could be useful because this is a very small paintbrush. It might be beneficial to have one that is a little bit larger. That way you don't spoil your message with all the liquid. All right, I'm gonna give this just a second to dry here. All right, come up and show you guys. Now, of course, when you do this at home, you have much more time to wait for your painting to dry, so your message won't get lost in the, the dripping of the liquid. But let me see if I can, on the 4 here, I'm not sure if the glare is blocking it, but you can see a little bit of green here. So I mentioned before that pigment, the anthocyanin, is a violet blue-green color, and this caused our paper to turn a little bit green. And I really am not sure if you guys can see that with the glare and the fact that the paper is wet, but when I was painting it, I did see the color change, and this is definitely one of those things that is cooler to experience yourself, because as you're painting the cranberry juice onto the baking soda ink, you can very clearly see the color change from this bright red color of the juice to the kind of greenish color of the reaction byproduct. And really all that is just a change in the molecular structure of the pigment, which sounds very fancy, but it's just changing shape and it makes it look a little different, and to us, we perceive that as a color change. So, and this is something for those of you who are leaders that may be watching, like I mentioned before, this is something that you can change many different aspects of to make it interesting. I mentioned you can change the ratio of water to baking soda to change your ink. You can change the ratio of cranberry juice to cranberry sauce, how long you boil it for, how you apply the cranberry juice to your painting once it's done. If you use a paintbrush, if you use a spray bottle, you could try this using different colored paper. That might change the way the pigment appears. Once you add the cranberry juice, there's a lot of different ways that you can mix this up. You can turn it into some sort of like a challenge or a puzzle for your 4-Hers to see what works the best or what is the coolest looking and what didn't work, and how you can take what didn't work and improve it for the next time. But this is just another great experiment where you can use things that you can find in your kitchen to do some cool experiments. So before I wrap up here, I'll talk about cleanup really quickly. So all of the things that we use today are safe to go down the drain. I know yesterday we had some that we had to pour into the garbage, but these you can pour down into the sink. Make sure you clean everything thoroughly, dispose of everything properly, and you're all set to go grab some friends and have some fun in the kitchen. Alrighty, thank you everyone for tuning in. Tomorrow we will be making homemade lava lamps and doing a magic milk experiment to wrap up our kitchen science experiment week. That will be at 1 p.m. You can keep your eye out for a post that has a list of materials that you'll need for those, and I look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks so much, guys.